Well, it's quite difficult because I have argued that commentary now has changed to a great degree, and I think to some extent even more so by the London Olympics, when the commentary was somewhat pro-British, probably more than it should have been at times, in my opinion. But I've argued that you look at a game through, if you're doing an England match, and let's go back to football, you're looking at it through English eyes. So you're going to give a view on how things are with them, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't pay due credit to the opposition. And if, as was the case for quite a long time in the early part of my career, there were matches against Scotland, Ireland and Wales, and we had one or two Scottish producers in particular, if I referred to England as we, they would be telling me not to do so in no uncertain terms. But when I've argued this, when people have asked me to chat about commentary and things, they always come back and say, where were the Germans? Which was the line I used in the hockey. And I suppose I was guilty, but I didn't think about that. The effect of that line, frankly, who cares, just didn't occur to me. I said what I said at the time and what I felt at the time. It was only afterwards that people, chose to set it up a little bit. It's become a bit of a cliche with me that when people ask me, used to ask me when I went to a match, what do I think is going to happen? My response, in a nice way, not to put them down, was to say, I don't know, and that's why I've come, and that's what excites me. So in terms of, you can't prepare for what's going to happen. You have to have a basic knowledge, and you have to know the players, and you've looked up a few things that might be relevant if the game is dull and you want to point out that he's going to win his 856th cap next week or whatever. I always find this difficult to answer, because it's not that I'm not, there are a lot of very good commentators, possibly too many of a similar style. I'd like to see people who create their own style. When I started, I was told I should be like David Coleman, which to be like David Coleman would be a great compliment. But I said I wanted to be a failure as Barry Davies rather than David Coleman #2, and I think that one or two of them should be more of their own style. But there's a lot of competition going on now, and there are a lot of commentators around. So I tend not to pick out a modern commentator, because if I pick out, Steve Wilson, then maybe one or two of the others will not be happy. So I'd rather not include them. They've got a good bunch, but you have to accept the fact that one man's commentator is another man's irritation. Yes, there are a lot more, and they do radio and they do television. With the result, in my opinion, there's much more talk on television than there used to be, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, because I think the viewer has his own views and wants to have time to think about that, and if he's constantly being talked to, or in some cases talked at, or feels he's party to a conversation that's going on, rather than being able to feel, as was the case when I first got into commentary, the idea was to put the viewer in his seat in the stand. I think that sort of thing has been forgotten. But people might listen to this, might say, oh, that's old-fashioned. But that was my view. Different people I work with, when I've said to one or two of them, if you said half of what you said, you would actually achieve twice as much, because people would be able to take in the technical points that you're making. And I feel guilty about possibly occasionally being critical of Trevor Brooking, because compared with them, with the modern guys, who are all there as experts from within the game, he would say far less, and he was very good. I enjoyed working with Mark Lawrenson, and I think Mark has a lot of great one-liners, But the thing which disappoints me is that the commentator quite often feels he has to pick up that line, and he shouldn't. He should just let it stay on the ether for a little bit longer so that people appreciate it. But we don't get much of that anymore. I like a bit of light and shade in commentary, and the result of that is sometimes I make the sound supervisor work very hard, because a throwaway line can be literally that if he's not sort of adjusting slightly. And I always used to have the crowd quite loud in my ears. I should probably be stone deaf before I leave this mortal coil, because I like to gauge my own sound against the sound I was hearing in my ears. And trying to do commentary without a crowd is extremely difficult. I find it so. So yes, a variation of sound and use of language. And I learned a lot that I put into play as a commentator from working with a chap called Jeff Goddard on a series called Maestro, where I did the interviewing and wrote the script and voiced over the bits that needed voicing over, and he would make me do a line 10 times because he didn't think that the cadence was quite right or this was quite right, and I learned how to better use my voice. You know, probably over the course of the season you'll say 6 times this looks promising, or there's an opening here or whatever, and of those 6 times, maybe if you're getting a good average, 2 will result in a goal. I was quite pleased when I came back to do Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park against West Ham to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Match of the Day, and I hadn't done a commentary for 10 years on football. And I saw a goal from quite early in the move outright and said of the possibilities of a goal being scored, and it was. You see what you see and you say what you say. I don't think there's a set description of a goal from 20 yards, you know, a version of, oh, what a cracker, or whatever. There are a number of versions, and there is a tendency, I guess, to say that sort of thing. But sometimes it's best avoided. I don't know, it's a natural reaction. And different commentators have, you know, some people prefer a goal that had 10 passes. I mean, the end of a move, I think it was England's second goal against Poland in '86, which was a really good move that produced the goal. That would give me as much. Lineker's second, it got a hat-trick, didn't he? The start of the great Gary Lineker as a player and now as a pretender. You know, you react as you react. And you know, sometimes people said, you didn't enjoy that match, did you? And I said, well, frankly, no. And there used to be a phrase from some producers, build it up. The moment you build up a match and try to make it sound better than it actually is, the match itself will build up, and then you're going off the register. Well, it's nice not to keep describing things in the same way. Every commentator, I'm sure, when he sees a compilation of goals scored, and you think, oh golly, I've said, oh golly, 3 times, 4 times in that little sequence, but over 6 months perhaps. But when they're pulled together, you know, you're conscious. I was conscious of that, but more afterwards. At the time, although if I'd used a description and something else came along, maybe something in what passes for a brain would have clicked in to say, don't say that again. And I have said, if I got stuck in an expression, I've said to the producer's assistant, if I say that again, please scream at me, because I've used that line 3 times in the last 4 or 5 minutes, because I listen to myself. So when I make a mistake, I've tended to concede that I've made a mistake, and also use of expressions come into it as well, because I've listened to myself talking. I'm not that keen on myself, but you know what I mean. It does help. You become aware of how you're saying things. Eating. Anything that gives you indigestion, that's for sure. Um, Probably there's a little bit of the footballer's thing in this. I mean, you want to be at your fittest and sharpest for the 90 minutes that matter, or longer. But I don't know that I ever consciously thought too much about that. I mean, Match of the Day used to provide lunches sometimes. You weren't exactly presented with a menu beforehand. You have notes, but I think your notes are to a great extent like the program. If you're watching a match, you look at your program. If the game gets a little dull, you might look down at something in your program. So number of caps, appearances, when last scored, things like that can be there. But I certainly went through a phase when doing preparation for matches, I probably over-prepared, and in an edited version was looking for places where I could get them in, until I realised that that was actually working against what I wanted to do. And when I was given the FA Cup final, I over-prepared like mad. I went back and made the same mistake, and I think it did impede my commentary a bit. I've been in a few commentary boxes which were without all sorts of basic requirements, like a window you could look through that wasn't dirty, or a monitor that was actually working and not flickering. No, I mean, I used to like to have two monitors so that you've got a goal here and a goal there, and your eye moves from one to the other, and the pitch. I probably looked at the pitch more often than technically you're supposed to, because I like to try and widen the vision of the viewer. It's not so important these days because there are so many more cameras. I mean, when I started we had 4 cameras, and if we ended the match with 4 cameras, that was a huge achievement. Yes, I think there's a tendency to assume that football commentary is the most difficult of all, and I'm not convinced that it is. There are certain things like rowing, like doing gymnastics, that may be more difficult for the commentator in timing and so on. The main thing about commentary is listen to everybody, but be yourself. You know, learn things from everybody, and some things discard that don't suit you. Being able to judge a moment, that it doesn't need the fact that it's his. Maybe with Vardy, when he broke the record, you needed to say that he'd broken the record, but I'm not sure you need to say that's the 9th goal, that's the 10th goal. You know, that can come afterwards, but not straight away.